Discover the 7 amazing mortals who transformed into gods. Touching Greek myths for your sleep. Sarah stared at the dusty box sitting in her grandfather's attic, her fingers lingering over its fragile edges. Inside, she found a collection of Greek myths, tales of mortals who dared to challenge their fates. Her breath quickened as she read the first few lines. The courage these characters exhibited ignited something within her, a flicker of inspiration that had long been snuffed out under the weight of nursing hours and family obligations. Yet, it ignited unease, too. She had sacrificed her own dreams for so long. Could she still be the writer she had yearned to be? As a 34-year-old nurse from a small Midwestern town, Sarah was the embodiment of duty. Her days were riddled with the demands of work, caring for others in a local hospital, and meeting the endless needs of her family. And yet, the damp corners of her heart throbbed with unfulfilled ambitions, like an old wound that refused to heal. Each shift reminded her of her grandfather's stories, once revered but ultimately dismissed by the town he had poured his soul into. His ambition, a seed planted in her spirit, sat rotting. And now, in this moment, the proximity of that dusty box brought both hope and dread. What if she opened that door? What if she wrote her first story, only to face the same scorn that had haunted her grandfather? The thought made her stomach turn, tightening like a vice. She clutched the box harder, the dust swirling around her like a storm of her own making. Would her family see her ambition as a betrayal? Their past disappointment weighed heavily. They had conditioned her to conform, to put family first. But what if the act of writing set her free? With each convincing thought, doubt clawed back, gnawing at her like a parasite feeding off her courage. Before we continue, I need to tell you about something important that's happening. YouTube has been making changes to the system and many people are losing notifications from channels they follow. If you're enjoying the content, click the bell and mark all notifications so you don't miss the next videos. And if you can leave a like, it really helps with reach. Seriously, it makes a difference. Oh, tell me in the comments where you're watching from. I'm always curious to know who's on the other side of the screen. Now let's continue. Each time she dared to put pen to paper, her mind blurred with anxiety. Could she really weave her emotions into characters that might resonate? Every attempt felt futile as backlash from a local writing group echoed in her ears: mockery, ridicule. They deemed her work trivial, unrefined. A knot of shame twisted inside her, driving her deeper into solitude. The bravery of those mythical heroes seemed a cruel joke as she sat stifled by anxiety and ridicule. It was during this isolation that Dr. Anderson stepped into her life, an unexpected mentor who saw a flicker of talent. His guidance pushed her, turning her raw thoughts into compelling narratives. The transformation was intoxicating yet terrifying. As she penned her piece for an upcoming community showcase, the pressure bore down. What if she failed? What if this push for self-identity ended as her grandfather's did? As she listened to the whispers of doubt tainting her resolve, she felt the crushing weight of her past. Standing on the precipice of vulnerability, fear surged through her. As Sarah stood at the threshold of sharing her story, her heart raced with the enormity of it all. Would she find her voice, or would she be crushed under the expectations of those who knew her? Everything she had worked towards loomed in that moment. Would she redefine her narrative or remain shackled by her fears? The path ahead shimmered with uncertainty, and just as she took a breath to step into the spotlight, a wave of hesitation washed over her, leaving her trembling in the anticipatory silence of the crowd. The initial rush of adrenaline tightened in Sarah's throat as she reached for the microphone, the buzzing hum of the audience amplifying her unease. Each face turned toward her became a scrutiny, reminders of the previous critiques that had haunted her attempts at writing. Yet, within that crowd, she felt something shift, a flicker of determination bolstered by the latent creativity she had dared to unearth. This moment was hers. No longer would she be defined solely by her role as a nurse or the expectations imposed by family. As she adjusted the microphone, a burning intensity surged within her, a blend of fear and ambition that ignited a long-dormant purpose. The myths of those courageous mortals swirled in her mind, urging her to seize this opportunity. They had faced divine wrath, treachery, and even failure, yet they persisted. If they could endure, perhaps so could she. With a steadying breath, Sarah launched into her narrative. The nervous stammering of her initial words faded as her story unfolded, a vivid tale of a woman standing on the edge of a chasm, teetering between despair and hope. Through her own reflections, she wove in the mythic resonance of transformation, expressing her fears and dreams with a raw honesty that seeped from her core. Her voice began to gather strength, merging vulnerability with the very essence of resilience. The crowd listened intently as Sarah painted her struggles, depicting nights spent scribbling thoughts in the dim light, longing to break free from the burdens of everyday life. As she shared the setbacks, interspersing them with the glimmers of hope sparked by Dr. Anderson's mentorship, she witnessed new expressions dancing across her audience's face. Empathy twinkled in their eyes, and for the first time, Sarah felt connected not as a nurse, or a dutiful daughter, but as a writer. Every word she chose began to peel away the layers of doubt that had encased her. The sapling of ambition, once fragile, surged to life with newfound vigor, each phrase nurturing her confidence. She was reclaiming not only her voice but also her identity. When she finished, a surge of disbelief washed over her. She had shared a piece of her soul. Applause rang through the room, and she stared wide-eyed at the audience. It was a release, not just of pent-up fears but a step toward self-affirmation. The echoes of laughter and cheers felt like a long-forgotten melody, one she was finally allowing herself to dance to. But as pride began to swell, a shadow of anxiety crept back in. What would her family think? Had she really crossed a line that could never be uncrossed? The moment of triumph was marred by an immediate onslaught of questions. Voices in her head taunted her uncertainty, yet a new voice emerged, one that echoed with the conviction of the ancient heroes she had read about. They had faced uncertainty, embraced their destinies, and transformed into something greater. Why couldn't she? As she stepped off the stage, exhilaration coursed through her, but doubt lingered, an uninvited guest refusing to leave. Determined to confront her fears, Sarah's thoughts swirled with the need for clarity. Did she dare venture further into the world of storytelling, knowing the risk of vulnerability? The allure of writing consumed her, yet the cost of rejection loomed large. And then, in the midst of her contemplation, a familiar face appeared in the crowd. A woman from the writing group, arms crossed, lips pursed, a living reminder of her past critiques. The time had come to face not only her fears of judgment but to confront the very critics that had nearly silenced her. Would Sarah stand her ground against disapproval, or would the specter of failure once again clamp down on her newfound voice? Sarah stepped down from the stage, her heart still racing. The applause had faded, but the weight of the woman's presence remained a palpable pressure in the air. As she approached, confidence collided with anxiety, dredging up memories of harsh critiques and invalidation. This was not just any critic, this was a ghost from her past, a voice that had worn away her resolve. Interesting story, the woman said, her tone balancing on the tightrope between feigned interest and thinly veiled scorn. But do you really think you can be a writer? The question dangled in the space between them, heavy with implications. Sarah's breath caught momentarily, a flash of embarrassment igniting her cheeks. The audience had seen her as a storyteller stepping into her light, but would this woman pull her back into shadow? She clenched her fists, grounding herself in the moment. She could walk away, let the judgment slide off like rain, or she could confront it head-on. The choice was clear. "I don't know if I can be a writer," Sarah replied, her voice steady despite the tremors in her heart. "But today, I felt like one for the first time." There was a subtle power in her admission, a reclaiming of identity that felt liberating. The woman raised an eyebrow, a silent challenge sparking between them. "That's quite an ambitious leap. You've always been a nurse, did you forget that?" Those words were like a bitter potion, reminding Sarah of previous limitations she had felt tethered to. But she refused to let them fester. "I'm still a nurse," she said, the firmness growing in her tone. "But I am also shaping my own story, and I won't let anyone define what that looks like." The woman's face hardened, but Sarah detected a flicker of something, maybe respect, or perhaps simply surprise. It was an unfamiliar sight. She had always viewed this woman through the lens of intimidation. In this moment, Sarah crossed a boundary, establishing her right to exist in multiple worlds without apology. As they exchanged curt nods, Sarah felt the thrill of possibility surge again, driving away the remnants of doubt. It wasn't merely about sharing her narrative, it was about blending her identities, drawing strength not just from nursing or writing, but from embracing both with vigor. Returning to her seat, the whispers of the audience swirled around her. Some were still buzzing with enthusiasm about her performance, while others seemed more reflective. Their interpretations were all valid, yet Sarah recognized a need for her own authority in this new domain. To be a writer was not merely to write, but to embody the courage to be seen. The anticipation of her next steps electrified her. A new story was waiting to be written, one that would encapsulate not just her struggles, but also her growth, her hybrid self emerging from the cocoon of fear. However, before she could focus on the page, she noticed Dr. Anderson in the far corner, leaning against a wall, a proud yet inquisitive look on his face. What would he think about her interaction with the critic? Was this misunderstanding an obstacle to her newfound path, or a catalyst for further growth? Uncertainty whispered through her mind, intertwining with a strange exhilaration. The potential to confront not just the woman, but the world of literature itself, loomed ahead like an uncharted territory. Could she finalize her story and truly make it her own? In that moment, clarity blossomed. Sarah would take her writing journey seriously, exploring new avenues of expression, but she also knew that she had to remain open to both encouragement and challenge. With renewed determination, she left her seat, ready to seek Dr. Anderson. She needed to discuss the next steps in her writing and how to channel her experiences into tangible projects. But just as she turned to navigate through the mingling crowd, a voice rang out, catching her breath. "Hey, you!" It was the critic, and she was headed straight for her again. The walls closed in with a mix of adrenaline and curiosity. Would this encounter yield a pathway to collaboration, or would it extinguish the fire Sarah had rekindled? The critic approached, her shoes clicking sharply against the floor, breaking through the ambient chatter. Palms sweaty, heart racing, Sarah's instincts urged retreat, but she anchored herself with a conscious breath. This was the moment to firmly ground her newfound identity. "Did you really mean what you said on stage?" The woman's gaze cut through the noise. "That you felt like a writer?" "Yes," Sarah replied, her voice stronger than ever. The moment was alive, turbulent with the challenge and opportunity which lay before her. "That's exactly how I felt." "Yes, but that doesn't mean you can just decide to be something different, does it?" The woman leaned in slightly, a predator savoring the scent of doubt in the air. "Being a writer is more than just feeling. It's hard work, vulnerability, and often relentless critique. You need more than a fleeting moment to call yourself a writer." "That's true," Sarah countered, an unexpected calm enveloping her as she found her ground against the undercurrent of intimidation. "But I don't think it's just about titles or even the craft itself. It's about the stories worth telling and the courage to tell them." A flicker of irritation crossed the critic's face, but Sarah didn't flinch. The shadows of the past whispered less fiercely than before. Here, at this moment, Sarah was not just reclaiming her identity, she was redefining it. "I don't need your approval. I'm not looking for validation from you or anyone else," Sarah continued, each word an act of defiance against the echoes of that earlier self. She felt every tether of past insecurity snap, setting her free. "Writing is part of who I am. And whether or not I succeed in your eyes, my voice deserves to be heard." The critic straightened, surprise momentarily softening her features into something oddly human. "That's a bold statement." "It's the truth," Sarah replied, an ember of inspiration igniting within her. No longer limited, she saw the broader landscape of possibilities unfurling before her like a vibrant tapestry woven from her experiences. As they stood there, the crowd faded into the background, a mere backdrop to this pivotal moment. This confrontation wasn't a detour, but rather a crucial pivot point in her development. "Let us see if you can sustain that fire," the critic said, a challenge lacing her words but with a hint of newfound respect. "If you're truly committed to writing, I suggest you challenge yourself beyond your comfort zone. Attend workshops, submit your work, and embrace the feedback that may come your way. Writing is an evolution." "Thank you," Sarah replied, surprised by her own ability to accept advice. A soft wind of determination swept through her. This path was riddled with uncertainty, but she was ready to navigate it with intention. The critic nodded, as if warning Sarah that this was just the beginning of her journey, before departing back into the mingling crowd. Sarah remained rooted for a moment longer, realizing that each hurdle faced was a stepping stone, not a wall. Her complex identity between nurse and aspiring writer was no longer a burden but a source of power. With purpose rekindled, she sought out Dr. Anderson. Her mind raced with thoughts about future projects, plot ideas, and the very real possibility of workshops and writing circles that could deepen her understanding and hone her voice. Each step felt charged with momentum as she found him reviewing notes among colleagues, his expression glowing with supportive pride. She approached him and spoke with conviction. "Dr. Anderson, I want to talk about moving forward, not just in my writing but also how my experiences can enhance my storytelling. I want to make this a serious endeavor." "Great to hear, Sarah," he smiled, "but remember, pursuing this path will indeed test your commitment." "I'm ready for whatever it takes," she asserted, beaming with confidence. But as their conversation intensified, a shadow flickered across her mind, pulling at her distraction a reminder of the harsh world waiting with critiques. Yet, with every passing moment of clarity, she felt the grip of fear loosen. "Let us set actionable goals then," Dr. Anderson said, scribbling notes, "but we'll need to confront those fears and uncertainties head-on." Before they could settle into a strategic plan, a figure emerged from the crowd, one Sarah recognized all too well. The woman from the earlier critique appeared again, this time with a more deliberate intent. The narrative tension tightened. What would this next confrontation reveal about Sarah's commitment, both to her writing and to facing the looming specter of her past? The critic approached with an air of confidence, her presence a stark reminder of the doubts Sarah had worked so hard to banish. Each click of her heels reverberated like a drumbeat in Sarah's chest. A surge of adrenaline coursed through Sarah's veins as she braced herself, knowing this moment could either inspire growth or reignite her insecurities. "I didn't expect to see you so eager to discuss your future," the critic remarked, her eyes narrowing slightly. "Is there some sort of plan in place?" "Yes," Sarah replied, forcing her voice to steady despite the chaos within. "I've spoken with Dr. Anderson about my goals, and I'm ready to take this seriously. I want to attend workshops and submit my work for feedback. I want to grow." The critic regarded her with a measured expression, as if weighing the sincerity of Sarah's intentions. Writers' workshops can be enlightening, but they can also be brutal. You must be prepared to confront harsh truths about your work, truths that challenge your very identity. "I understand," Sarah said, her resolve sharpening with each word she spoke. "But I've already faced my fears. I'm not turning back. This is about more than just writing, it's about embracing every part of who I am." An eyebrow raised, the critic examined Sarah with renewed interest. "It seems you've done some reflection. But tell me, what exactly are you hoping to discover from these workshops? Beyond the craft of writing, I want to understand how my experiences as a nurse can enrich my stories. I've seen people in their most vulnerable moments, and I believe those insights can add depth to my characters." The critic's demeanor shifted, the predator giving way to a cautious ally. "You might start by writing those experiences down. Create pieces that speak to that vulnerability you're familiar with. It requires courage, yes. But true writers expose their souls." Her words resonated deeply with Sarah. The prospect of harnessing those moments, both painful and beautiful, invigorated her spirit. She remembered the stories she had witnessed at the hospital, the fragility of life and resilience of the human spirit. Each event felt like a thread that could be woven into her narratives. I'll do that, Sarah replied, determination igniting within her as she set her focus. I will write, and I will dig deep. Good, the critic nodded slowly, an odd sense of approval in her eyes. Keep that fire burning. You'll need it when the critiques start pouring in. Writing is all about evolution, and evolution requires an uncomfortable amount of honesty. As they spoke, Sarah sensed the critic's underlying skepticism transforming. Perhaps, just perhaps, this woman saw something worth nurturing in her commitment. Thank you for your insights. I won't shy away from the discomfort, Sarah stated, feeling emboldened by her own words. I'm ready to face whatever comes next. With a nod, the critic took a step back, her demeanor slightly softened. Then I suggest you prepare for the next stage. What are your immediate goals in this journey? I want to commit to daily writing practices. I'll journal experiences, explore new writing styles, and perhaps attend that workshop next month, Sarah shared, her heart racing at the gravity of her decisions. Very well, the critic said, a small smile breaking her stern exterior. Stay committed to that vision. I will be watching. Success means being your own fiercest critic before anyone else can be. As she turned to leave, Sarah felt the weight of her approval lingering in the air. The exchange had pushed her into a new existential plane, a duality of hope and anxiety twined together. Still electrified from their conversation, Sarah sought out Dr. Anderson again. She needed to share her newfound plan and the deeper understanding she had gained regarding her journey. But as she anxiously approached him, a question lingered in her mind, a potential shadow threatening her resolve. Would the courage to expose herself through her writing lead her to discovery or obliteration? The days that followed the encounter with the critic blurred into a whirlwind of determination and self-reflection. Each morning brought a new promise to herself, a commitment to dive deep into her writing, to pull from the well of her nursing experiences and shape them into stories that could resonate. Sarah found herself sitting at her small desk, pen poised, fingers trembling slightly as she prepared to unravel the truths she had kept hidden. The first few attempts were torturous. Sarah wrote about the soft whispers of dying patients, their stories unfinished, their fears palpable in the sterile air of the hospital room. Each word tore at her insides, revealing not just her patient's vulnerabilities, but her own fears of inadequacy. The act of writing became a mirror reflecting her insecurities, and that reflection was hard to face. Despite the discomfort, she forced herself to confront it. Journaling became both her sanctuary and battleground. She splattered thoughts on pages, her heart racing, often struggling to figure out what to expose and what to shove back into the shadows. But there was a curiosity growing within her. With each page, she discovered aspects of her own psyche, her ability to empathize, her capacity for resilience. She realized that she was not just telling her patients' stories, but her own, laced with the same tapestry of hope and despair. It was too long before she signed up for the workshop the critic had suggested. That act alone felt monumental, a declaration of her commitment. Yet, as she entered the modestly lit room filled with strangers, an old familiar anxiety tightened around her chest. Faces turned to her as the facilitator directed everyone to introduce themselves. I'm Sarah, she said, her voice shaky but steady. I'm a nurse, but I want to explore creative writing, especially how my experiences can contribute to meaningful narratives. An encouraging murmur rippled through the group, and it felt as if a door to possibility had opened. Throughout the session, they shared their drafts, raw and trembling. The feedback was often constructive but sometimes brutally honest. Each critique felt like a small jab, a whisper of doubt creeping back in. But between those jabs, she heard sincerity, a belief in her words, her vision. She left the first session feeling both exhilarated and drained. The next day, Sarah woke up early, determined to continue writing. She sank deeper into personal experiences, detailing moments of pain and joy, of holding a hand in comfort. Her pen became a tool of liberation. After a week, she felt a shift in her writing. It was no longer just about wrestling with her fears, it became a platform to understand people, their struggles mirroring her own. The act of storytelling evolved, transforming each narrative into a shared experience. Here, in this space of vulnerability, she began to weave her identity as a writer and a caregiver. The workshop would continue for several weeks, each session tightening the bond between her writing and her reality. Yet, as she gathered her insights and newfound skills, a nagging doubt echoed in her thoughts. Was she brave enough to share the darkest pieces? Would exposing this part of her journey deepen her connection with others, or would it unravel the courage she was building? With that uncertainty looming, Sarah sat at her desk the night before the next workshop, pacing a decision in her mind. Could facing the scariest truths in her writing be the only way to unveil her true voice, or would it lead her into chaos she couldn't control? The morning of the next workshop dawned with an unsettling mixture of anticipation and dread. As Sarah forced herself out of bed, her mind flitted between the thrilling possibilities of sharing her work and the suffocating weight of vulnerability that was about to descend upon her. She had avoided the risk of exposure for too long, yet now it seemed inescapable. In the early light, she brewed her coffee, the aroma mingling with the scent of fresh ink lingering in her writing space. Sitting at her desk, she leafed through her journal, pages filled with raw emotion and unfiltered experiences. Each entry showcased a patchwork of her psyche, fear of failure, a deep yearning for connection, and a glimmer of hope. All of it converged into the narrative she was crafting, one that would balance on the edge of honesty and compassion. As she prepared for the workshop, she felt herself wrestling internally with the decision to read her latest piece, a story rooted in her experiences as a nurse. It depicted a patient who faced the end of life with dignity, a scenario that had left an indelible mark on her understanding of mortality. She questioned if putting such intimate moments under the spotlight of scrutiny was wise. What if the words came out wrong? What if the emotion she had woven in was misinterpreted? Arriving at the workshop, her pulse quickened, a familiar knot tightening in her stomach. She entered the room, scanning the faces of her peers, each one a potential judge of her rawness. As the session began, she kept her notebook close, flipping through the pages absently, the words there feeling both like armor and a chilling vulnerability. The facilitator encouraged sharing without fear and charged everyone to embrace the discomfort of vulnerability as a catalyst for growth. An unexpected wave of adrenaline surged through Sarah. Her breath quickened, and with a decisive swallow, she raised her hand to share, her heart pounding in rhythm with the ticking clock on the wall, marking the dwindling moments before her leap. When her number was called, her words began to tumble out, trembling but resolute. She read her piece about the patient, each sentence immersing her deeper into the emotional landscape of the narrative. Listening to her own voice, she felt the audience's attention, an entire room drawn into the feel of fleeting moments and universal truths. Once she finished, silence enveloped her momentarily, and she almost retreated from the vulnerability that laid bare before them. It felt like an eternity before someone finally spoke. They began to offer feedback, and to her astonishment, what she received was not judgment, but profound empathy. "Your honesty resonates deeply with all of us," one participant said, eyes glistening. "We are all afraid, and your words give voice to that fear." In that moment, Sarah realized that her fears had been rooted in self-doubt and not in the potential reaction of others. The darkness she feared exposing was in fact a bridge to connection, allowing others to witness their struggles in her stories. As subsequent critiques rolled in, an unfamiliar confidence bloomed inside her. She felt the layers of her mask peeling away, revealing a nascent identity intertwined with both a caregiver and a storyteller. Yet, despite the positive affirmations, a lingering trace of uncertainty shadowed her newfound resolve. Could she continue to mine her deepest experiences without losing herself in the chaos of emotion? By the time the session concluded, Sarah had tasted a glimpse of her true voice, raw and infectious. But a question loomed large in her mind: what other undisclosed truths lay within her, waiting for the right moment to be uncovered? Even as she left the workshop, invigorated yet shaken, she felt a quiet urgency growing inside. The path ahead was littered with emotional minefields, each one a potential breakthrough or a personal disaster waiting to happen. It was clear, the time had come for Sarah to confront the most dangerous narratives of her past, those that could either shatter her resolve Or set her free. The light of the next morning filtered through Sarah's window, stealing into the quiet space where her thoughts churned. Despite the exhilaration from the workshop, shadows of apprehension danced at the edges of her mind. She hadn't expected the responses to her reading to resonate so profoundly, igniting sparks of connection that she hadn't realized she craved. As she brewed her morning coffee, the steam curling in the air felt like a gentle reminder of her own renewal. Maybe this was her opportunity to embrace the narratives that shaped her, rather than shy away from them. But as she set 2 mugs on the table, she recognized a growing fear. Exposing deeper truths could also lead to unwanted scrutiny. What if her past haunted her even more after being unveiled? Sipping her coffee, she resolved to confront this fear. With a flare of determination, she pulled out her journal and began crafting a new piece, one that would not only welcome her past but utilize it. She found herself drawn to the days when she felt the most haunted by her choices as a caregiver, the moments of doubt, moral conflict, and deep reflection that had colored her nursing practice. The pen glided across the page, each word dripping with the gravity of real experiences. But as she wrote, questions nagged her again. Was raw honesty enough? Would she mask her emotions behind metaphors and flowery language to avoid the pain, or could she stand tall with the truth, however jagged it might be? Days passed, and although she revisited her piece, each word felt both empowering and treacherous. She attended therapy sessions that often led to deeper reflections about her career and her interactions with dying patients and their families. The narrative shifted in her mind, evolving into a heartfelt exploration that echoed the vulnerabilities she had first encountered during the workshop. One evening, after a particularly challenging day, a memory surfaced, a patient named Thomas who once sought solace in her presence as they discussed his regrets and dreams. What was it about Thomas that sparked her empathy? His battle against the confines of terminal illness was matched only by his radiant spirit, which clung to life's fleeting beauty. It dawned on Sarah then, perhaps she needed to return to that moment, to revisit her conversation with Thomas to draw inspiration, but it wouldn't come without emotional labor. Discovering the depths of her anguish and the ecstasy of connection could be the key not only to understanding herself but to bridging the gap between her roles as a caregiver and a storyteller. With every word she penned, Sarah challenged herself to unearth more of the dialogue they had shared, exploring her fears over his impending death and her discomfort in confronting mortality. This was her reckoning, a push into the depths of her emotions, both terrifying and liberating. As she wrote, catharsis blossomed amidst the chaos, and an unexpected clarity emerged. Her experiences shaped her not just as a nurse but also as a human being navigating the labyrinth of grief and joy. The realization hit with an electric jolt. Sarah had stumbled upon transformative insight, the profound connection between her clinical experiences and her innate desire to tell stories that could foster healing not only for others but for herself. She could weave the 2 threads of her identity tighter, creating a tapestry that honored both her past and present struggles. Now, with her pen poised over the page, Sarah confronted her ultimate challenge. Could she bear the weight of Thomas's story, knowing it would force her to confront not just what she learned through his eyes, but also the reasons she had shied away from fully accepting her own? The clock ticked louder in her mind as she deliberated, weighing how much of herself she was willing to expose in pursuit of authenticity. Every moment felt charged with significance, a precipice on which she balanced precariously. She understood now that the greatest growth often stemmed from grappling with the darkest narratives of her past. With a steady resolve, Sarah prepared to face them head-on. But an unexpected memory gripped her. What if the very person she had been avoiding feeling was still close enough to derail her progress? Sarah stared at her journal, uncertainty colliding with her newfound resolve. The shadow of that memory was suffocating, a reminder of the figure she'd pushed away for so long, her estranged father. The very thought of confronting him sent her emotions into a whirlwind. Could she risk delving into the pain their broken relationship had caused, especially now when she was beginning to acknowledge her own vulnerability? The emotional tumult nestled deep in her chest. She had drifted through this life carrying that burden, hoping if she ignored it long enough, it would fade. But the growing desire for authenticity could no longer coexist with lingering ghosts. As she turned to her notes, a thought flashed. Her father's presence had conditioned her perception of intimacy and trust. Much like Thomas, he was a pivotal figure, but unlike Thomas's ethereal spirit, her father's essence felt heavy and problematic. That afternoon, she scheduled an unexpected appointment with a therapist who specialized in family dynamics, something she had hesitated to do before. With a tinge of nervous energy coursing through her veins, she exited the clinic, a mix of anxiety and exhilaration fluttering in her stomach. Confronting her father would be her litmus test, a true measure of this merging identity as both a caregiver and storyteller, triggering heartfelt encounters that could reshape not just her narrative, but the fabric of her very existence. As the days turned into a blur, Sarah immersed herself in the memory of Thomas, unearthing the courage he had ignited within her, stirring her need to reclaim her voice amidst chaos. In her subsequent sessions, she shared vivid accounts from her nursing days, each story interweaving her raw emotions with Thomas's wisdom. With each revelation, she felt herself becoming less defined by the shadows of her history and more by the light of her newfound narrative strength. One evening, she reached a turning point. She crafted a letter to her father, pouring out her feelings into written words she never deemed possible to express. Channeling her uncertainties and pain transformed her emotions into powerful prose, stripped of fragile undertones. By articulating her thoughts rather than bottling them, she reclaimed ownership of her experience. What once felt like a wound now resembled a scar, an indication of growth rather than mere suffering. Standing at her desk, Sarah felt the weight of the letter linger in her hands, a physical representation of years pent up inside her. It was as if every word ignited new clarity. Here lay a bridge between who she had become and who her father might still be. Releasing it could lead to liberation or more heartache, but allowing fear to dictate her actions had become intolerable. With resolve ignited, she made the journey to the mailbox, the letter feeling like a vessel for closure and offering for a conversation she had never thought would happen. But as she approached the opening, a voice cut through the quiet of the evening. "Sarah." It was her brother, Jason. Their relationships had been strained since the rift with their father surfaced, and an unexpected confrontation was now unavoidable. "You're writing to him, aren't you?" Jason's gaze pierced her, heavy with concern and unvoiced judgments. Fingers trembling over the envelope, Sarah felt the weight of her decision amplify. The time had come to face not only her father but the intricate web of their familial ties, fragile yet demanding attention. "Maybe it's time," she replied softly, half seeking affirmation and half fearing judgment. Jason stepped closer, a shared understanding silently knitting them together. With her heart racing, Sarah realized it wasn't merely her story that lay in the balance, but also the collective history tethered to every choice made in the name of family. What would happen when the truth of their shared past emerged? Would healing be possible, or would it deepen the chasms already etched in their lives? These questions hung heavily in the air, setting the stage for what was to come. Days turned into weeks, and in the wake of sending the letter to her father, Sarah found herself at a crossroads. It stirred within her an uncontainable mix of anticipation and anxiety. No longer could she hide from the specter of their fractured relationship. The act of writing had transformed into a catalyst for growth, pushing her to confront not just her past, but her very identity. As she continued attending workshops, her narrative development flourished alongside her emotional intelligence. Each session became a space for her to refine her writing while exploring deeper themes of connection and estrangement. Drawing from her nursing experiences, Sarah began to create vivid characters grappling with fear, heartbreak, and healing, a reflection of her journey and an embodiment of her evolving self. But amid the creative momentum, the question of her father's response loomed perpetually in Sarah's mind. How would he react? Would he embrace an opportunity to rebuild their relationship, or would he remain shrouded in the shadows of their history? Each day became a practice in patience, honing a softness that came from facing uncertainty, the very courage she had come to admire in her patience. When she received the response from her father weeks later, her heart raced, a flood of emotions threatening to spill into the pages of her journal. The letter was brief, yet it was filled with an emotion that was unexpected. He had read her words and would like to meet. There was an openness she hadn't anticipated, a willingness to reevaluate the past, to confront the chasms that had divided them. Emboldened and terrified, Sarah found herself anticipating that meeting with an electric pulse of energy. She approached the day equipped with her writing. It felt like armor, a shield against the vulnerability she chose to expose. These written words gleamed with the truth she rediscovered, the experiences that shaped her and the healing journey ahead. As she stepped into the cafe where they had agreed to meet, the air felt thick with unspoken tension. Her father sat at a small table, his presence seeming both familiar and foreign. The laughter of nearby patrons and the chime of ceramics all faded into the background as she approached him. "Thank you for coming," she began, her voice slightly faltering yet resolute. "I'm glad to be here, Sarah," he replied, his gaze searching hers, as if seeking reassurance beneath layers of past pain. The conversation unfolded in layers, both tender and raw. They navigated through their shared history, reconciling with moments of hurt and disappointment. It was during this dialogue that Sarah began to observe a softening in him. He seemed genuinely receptive to the exploration of their past. She shared her journey more than ever before, how her role as a nurse had shaped her into a storyteller and a caregiver. "I've been working through my feelings," he admitted, vulnerability surfacing in his voice. "I realize now that I never saw the weight of my actions, how they may have affected you." With each word shared, Sarah felt the burdens of her past loosening their grip over her present. The storytelling she had once feared to expose came pouring out, and she found strength in articulating her truth. They both acknowledged the complexities of love intertwined with hurt, recognizing that reconciliation would take both courage and time. Finally, as they sipped their coffees, she asked, "Can we build something new from this? I want the opportunity to connect, to re-establish trust, even if it takes time." Her father nodded, silent tears pooling in his eyes, and an unspoken acknowledgement hung in the air between them, solidifying the possibility of what lay ahead. Weeks turned into regular meetings, each a blend of writing shared and reflections punctuated by laughter and tenderness. Sarah's writing took on new life, infused with the richness of their conversations, echoing emotions that anchored within her filled with a newfound confidence. She felt herself evolving not just as a writer but as a whole person coming into her own. As months passed, Sarah completed her first narrative piece, interwoven with her father's presence, infused with the experience of vulnerability she had uncovered through her journey. The exploration of themes surrounding regret and redemption offered depth to characters who spoke of uncertainty amid the quest for connection. With every facet of her story shared, her identity blossomed, no longer defined by obligations and fear, but instead shaped by the courage to be seen and heard. Finally, as she sat down to submit her work to a local literary magazine, Sarah felt an exhilarating surge of confidence wash over her. She had crossed an invisible threshold. She wasn't just a nurse or a daughter, but a storyteller who had reconciled her narratives. In that moment, she realized that the act of sharing her voice was a triumph, an affirmation of her right to embrace her experiences. The journey had not eliminated fear but had transformed it into a companion guiding her toward profound authenticity. And as she pressed the send button on her submission, Sarah was not only affirming her role as a writer, she was solidifying her identity whole, authentic, and unapologetically herself. Now was the time to celebrate her achievements. If you want to follow the journey of human triumph and transformation that awaits, you need to subscribe now. This is the moment to show your support. Leave a like now to feed the algorithm and ensure you do not miss the next exclusive emotional stories. Comment your reactions and theories about Sarah's journey and share your thoughts on the power of rekindling lost connections. Don't wait even one more second to share this video with at least 5 friends who need to see how one can triumph over adversity through the art of storytelling.